Payday, payday. You want payday? I know that. David Benavidez with a shocking, and I do mean shocking, admission regarding Mr. Canelo Alvarez. It's official. Canelo Alvarez doesn't look like he wants to fight David Benavidez. In this video, I will break down this bad news, this unfortunate news. David Benavidez had a brand new interview with the Boxing Voice. And of course, the topic, the $1 million question, what about the Canelo fight? Fortunately, David Benavidez revealed that his promoters, Al Heyman, Samson Lukowitz, and his organizers were willing to pay Canelo Alvarez $60 million for his baseline guarantee. We'll say 55 to 60, right? And he said 60. Some of the reports said 55. However, that's just for the guarantee, like the baseline. So no matter what this fight does, Canelo would be walking away with that number in the neighborhood of 55 to 60 million dollars that they're willing to put up to ensure this fight happens, right? Cinco de Mayo. In addition, David Benavidez revealed in this interview that Canelo would also see pay-per-view upside. And keep in mind, I believe Canelo has different deals in Mexico, where he's from, where like he did a deal to keep boxing for free on free TV. So he has a Box Azteca deal and he's getting paid through them, I'm sure. And like for him distributing his fights through Box Azteca back at home. But I'm talking more so his American deal. So he would have that back at home in Mexico. He'd be getting a guaranteed $55-60 million plus in America, or maybe even everywhere. He would be getting a pay-per-view percentage, a percentage of the pay-per-view. So whatever that cut is, if this fight, because we know, in my opinion, Canelo versus Benavidez would be the biggest fight in boxing. I know people like Terrence Crawford said him and Canelo would be the biggest. I don't believe that. I think the fight that everyone's asking for are Canelo and Benavidez. Benavidez is known as the Mexican monster. Canelo's from Mexico, and some people think he's the king and he's the monster. So that's the clash that everybody wants to see. People like Winky Wright, Floyd Mayweather, Boxingego, and many others have openly and candidly put that bid out saying we want that. But unfortunately, what David Benavidez reveals in this latest interview is, despite this handsome offer to Canelo, $60 million, roughly $60 million plus pay-per-view upside, plus back at home in Mexico, the distribution deal. He also revealed that as far as his side, Canelo wanted to pay him the minimum to make the fight, which I guess that number is $5 million. He goes on to say, and I'm just paraphrasing because you guys can watch the actual interview yourself and interpret it yourself. But basically, David Benavidez was saying Canelo baseline guarantee 55-60 million plus all that back end money. So he would walk away over 100 million probably, you know, or something very close or very pretty when it's all said and done, based on the success of the pay-per-view and merchandise and all that. And I think it would be very successful because I just told you, I think it's the #1 fight in boxing. But Benavidez revealed he himself would only be getting $5 million and no cut of the pay-per-view. So this sounds like a pretty raw deal, but Benavidez admitted that he's been paid handsomely from Al Heyman and PBC, and he stated that, let's be real, basically he gets paid more than that to fight people who aren't Canelo Alvarez. Canelo has all the belts at 168, And there's other people that David Benavidez is fighting, and he's making good money. He literally said this on tape. He's making great money to fight those guys. So you would think entering the Canelo sweepstakes that would be the golden ticket. One would think that fighting Canelo Alvarez would put you in a different pay bracket than your previous fights. But Benavidez reveals that that's not really the case. Like, he would be getting his minimum, which we know when he's fighting Caleb Plant, because that was a pay-per-view. When he's fighting against Andrade, he made more than that because that was a pay-per-view and he was the main event, right? So I have a hard time believing the Plant fight, which was a much anticipated fight last year, as well as Andrade, he didn't see a nice chunk of change. So basically what this means is this. And before I go any further, and maybe some of you guys caught my live stream, I have talked with my source, and my source told me that Canelo's opponent has already signed and agreed to their terms. Now we're waiting on Canelo. As of me recording this, I don't know what anything that happens after this, but it looks like that fight is done and ready to go, contingent on Canelo finalizing his side of the deal. But I know who Canelo's fighting in his next fight, and it's not David Benavidez. Period. It's not him. Per my source. And I trust this source. I'm not going to reveal who it is and all that, but I trust the source is feeding me good information regardless. So it's not David Benavidez, which is a shame because at the end of the day, it's the biggest fight for Canelo. And Canelo wants the quote-unquote Mexican date, Cinco de Mayo. What better way, what better opponent than the Mexican monster? A guy who's Mexican-American and Ecuadorian. He's mixed, you know, from his mom and his dad. And it's just a fight that's been built up. He's been calling him out. The WBC says he'll be in March, and it's now March. He'll be Canelo's mandatory. But the WBC, aka We Back Canelo, they want to see Canelo happy. So what they're doing is they're creating a belt at 175. And since Benavidez, you know, making weight is not probably the easiest thing for him at this stage of his career, but they're trying to make it a little bit attractive. So now he's probably going to go up and fight Vodstick later this year for an interim belt. This is foolish. All you had to do is enforce the mandatory and tell Canelo, yo, you got to fight Benavidez. But that would be too much like right. But instead, they'd rather create confusion, create another belt in the 175 division, because the thing that's stupid is you have a strong champion and a standing champion who's a great fighter at 175, Artur Beterbiev, who already has the undisputed belt. Or excuse me, the WBC belt. Excuse me. He has the WBC belt. So we know that in June, he's supposed to fight against Dimitri Bivol in Saudi Arabia. So it just sounds really stupid that you would create this other, you know, version of a belt or interim belt when the biggest fight that could be made at 175 is already scheduled to happen and rumored to be happening, and it's for all the marbles for undisputed. So this is the type of stuff that gives boxing a bad name, because imagine being a casual. I would hate to just be learning boxing right now and not understood this stuff and not know what belts are what and things like that. It would be highly confusing, because you would be like, unlike the UFC or organization like that, where if Conor McGregor beats Eddie Alvarez, he's the only champion there in that particular lightweight division or whatever, right? Boxing doesn't work like that. You'll have a fight for undisputed that's supposed to happen this summer in Saudi Arabia, and then Benavidez versus Vodstick and then they'll just create a belt in the same division rather than just and make a guy move up rather than just force Canelo to fight David Benavidez. It's very sad. And this is why people say the alphabet belt, this, that, and the third. So, you hate to see it. Canelo Alvarez, it's very apparent that he wants no parts with David Benavidez. The offer is a lowball offer as far as I'm concerned. You offered him his minimum for a fight that we know is explosive, is good. Now, there's more than one way to get out of a fight. You can outright duck it, or you can price yourself out. You can say, hey, I'll fight against Deontay Wilder. Give me $20 billion, knowing they're not going to give you that amount. So it's just not a realistic amount and not a realistic ask, right? I think Leo Santa Cruz did that with Guillermo Rigondeaux back in the day. He asked for some kind of ridiculous money, and he just wouldn't get it for a fight like that. But it was a very good fight at that time, and Rigondeaux had been calling him out, right? That's one way. The other way is to lowball your opponent and give them peanuts. So at the end of the day, they feel compelled to turn down the offer, and then you can run back to the media, run back to the papers and say, yo, we offered David Benavidez a fight, but David Benavidez turned it down, because that's what the headline would read, is Benavidez turned down Canelo offer. But then when you look at the fine print, if that's even reported, you'll see it was a lowball number. David Benavidez and Jose Benavidez, shout out to them, they basically called Canelo's bluff, and they're like, whatever, we'll take it. Reason being, they were willing to take the short money because they know what they would do, or they believe they would beat Canelo. So as a result, they know it's on and popping after that. That win, a win over first they become undisputed. So it'd be a chance at all the belts at super middleweight. But furthermore, just to beat a name like Canelo Alvarez, who's widely respected, especially if they did it violently, like stopped Canelo, who has a great beard, he has a chin, that would catapult the Mexican monster, aka David Benavidez, to new heights, and it would make a superstar overnight. But Canelo, I truly believe, doesn't want to even give him the opportunity, because he knows David Benavidez is real and it's a dangerous fight. So he'd rather not even chance it and give the chance to a person like a David Benavidez, who has the style, the size, the height, right? Other guys he's willing to fight, like John Ryder and guys like Bivol, because he knows even if, like, let's say John Ryder beat Canelo Alvarez, he wouldn't blow up into this big star just like Bivol. Bivol actually beat Canelo Alvarez, and he still is not super popping in terms of a household name. Meanwhile, David Benavidez has branded himself great. His dad's a good talker, and guys like Mike Tyson are going to Benavidez's fights and gave him the moniker, the nickname, the Mexican Monster. It would just take David Benavidez and the pot would boil over with a win over Canelo Alvarez. And I truly, truly believe that Canelo doesn't want to let the next person, he doesn't even want to give the opportunity to potentially pass the torch to Benavidez. So truth be told, Benavidez got to keep moving on with his career. I would not be surprised one bit if we never get this fight. And it's sad because Canelo, 1 minute he says, I don't want to fight Mexicans, and then he might fight a Mexican opponent. But then that Mexican opponent won't be David Benavidez, right? He says, I'll fight anybody, I don't care. But the world wants to see you fight Benavidez, and you have the authority and the power, and PBC wants to fight, and you were working with PBC, right? It seems like an easy deal to make, and you just won't do it. You refuse to do it. It's crazy. It's like, imagine a teacher in the classroom, and the teacher is a math teacher, and the teacher is saying, can anyone answer this equation on the board? And you're raising your hand like, me, pick me. And she's looking around looking over you and looking past you when you're saying you have the formula or you have the answer to the riddle or the equation that she's asking for the answer to on the chalkboard. And you're like, pick me, pick me. I know the answer, and you're trying to get her attention, and she's acting like she don't see you. That's what Canelo Alvarez, in essence, is doing. He's hearing what people say. He has no choice. Like, after every win, people keep bringing up David Benavidez at his media scrums. They keep, like, he even gets mad when you bring up David Benavidez. So I know he still hears it. You know, I don't know how much he's on social media, but I know the pressure. You have to feel it. You have to feel that energy, because the energy just keeps growing. And I think the other thing is he wanted Benavidez to get knocked off, right? Like if Andre beat him, another guy that Canelo had many moons to face that he never faced, right? But if Andre beat him and knocked off Benavidez, it would be easy to see like, ha, and this is the guy you said that could beat me, ha, 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 right? But that's not what happened. Benavidez stopped Andrade violently, and it's just a bad look, people. Benavidez has done what Canelo has said he wanted the people to do. He says, why is everybody screaming my name? Why is everybody screaming Canelo? They need to fight each other. That's what he did. Benavidez fought Caleb Plant, a former champion in that division, great fighter, and he beat him, almost stopped him, but he beat him. That's a mutual opponent with Canelo. Last year, very next fight, he fought a guy that Canelo avoided, Demetrius Andrade, aka Boo Boo. And then he stopped him and pretty much made him retire on the stool. So you told him to fight, or you told everybody they need to fight each other. Benavidez is doing all that. Benavidez has called out Jermall Charlo and said, I want to fight Jermall Charlo, but he don't want to fight me. And, you know, we know Charlo's just kind of been MIA minus the Jose Benavidez fight. So Benavidez is doing everything he can. He's done everything the WBC has asked. If he had to fight David Lemieux, mandatory, he did it. He kept himself making weight, which was a problem in the past, and he lost his title. He hasn't failed any, tests like he did for the Coke thing in the past. Yet Canelo refuses to pick him, and everybody's screaming, fight Benavidez. So it's clear Canelo just beats to the sound of his own drum, does whatever he wants, and despite a lofty offer that really is unfair, like you guys see it. You see it on the screen. Benavidez would make $5 million, and then Canelo Alvarez would make $60 million plus pay-per-view. I mean, it's becoming harder and harder to be a Canelo Alvarez man fan and try to justify this. It don't matter who he fights next. I know who he's fighting next, and it's not David Benavidez, right? It becomes hard to justify it because you can't say a bunch of other guys deserve the fight more or bring more attention. You could say, oh, I don't mind this fight, but people would say that with David Benavidez. They would be like, ooh, I love this fight. This is the best fight. And it's clear Canelo is like he almost just wants to cash out and take the safest fights for the best money at this stage of his career. You guys let me know what you think. Is it unfair for Canelo to treat Benavidez like that? Let me know in the comments.